Welcome to ListWorthy's summary explanation of the 2002 movie The Time Machine. It is loosely based on the 1895 novel by H.G. Wells that goes by the same name. The movie follows Dr. Alexander Hardigan, a brilliant mathematician and inventor teaching at Columbia University in New York City. Alexander has some big and radical ideas about science, quite different from his friend, David Philby, who wants to teach more grounded and practical things.
I want my students to be prepared for the realities of the world they're about to greet.
Oh, I don't.
Philby encourages his friend Alexander to be more conservative in his teachings and to play it safe, as it is only his first year as associate professor at the university. When night falls, Alexander meets up with his girlfriend Emma at the park, where he proposes marriage. She gladly accepts, but their moment of happiness is quickly ruined by a mugger with a gun who ends up fatally shooting Emma when she resists his attempt to take her engagement ring. 4 years pass after Emma's death, and Alexander has turned into a recluse who does nothing but obsessively work on his project. His friend Philby is worried about him and tries to talk him into leaving the house, but Alexander just snaps at him. "No," he shouts, "I can't leave when I'm so close." Close to what? Philby wants to know. "What are you working on?" he asks. Alexander is cagey and refuses to reveal what he is working on, but to get rid of Philby, he promises to explain himself fully in a week's time. Philby is a little suspicious at this, but he easily agrees to meet with him in a week. "A week from today, you and I would have never had this conversation," Alexander says to himself when Philby leaves, and then pulls back the curtain on his big project. And yep, you probably guessed it, he built himself a time machine. Alexander puts on the exact same clothes he had been wearing on the night he proposed to Emma, hops onto his time machine, and fires it up. It works, and he finds himself on that fateful night of her death. He is so happy to see his girlfriend alive, he grabs her and plants a big old kiss on her lips. Wanting to prevent her death, Alexander manages to steer Emma away from the park in which she got killed, and they instead head into the city. But when he steps away from her briefly to buy her some flowers from a nearby flower shop, she is run over by a carriage, and she dies. Again. The poor man just can't seem to catch a break. Alexander quickly comes to the realization that any attempt on his part to save Emma will result in her death through other circumstances. Distraught, he travels forward into the future to the year 2030 to discover whether or not science has been able to solve his question of how to change the past. When he gets to the year 2030, he immediately heads for the New York Public Library, and while he is there, he meets a holographic sentient librarian called Vox 114. When he asks why the past cannot be changed, Vox 114 insists that time travel is impossible and is found only in the realm of fiction authors such as Isaac Asimov and H.G. Wells. When he looks himself up, Alexander learns that he was reported missing in 1903 and dismissed as a crackpot. He leaves the library and travels again to the year 2037 and finds New York City in a fiery mess. Looking up at the night sky, he sees that humanity seems to have accidentally blown a hole through the moon, the event rendering the Earth virtually unlivable. Alexander hops back onto his time machine to try and escape the nightmarish future, but the ground is shaking very violently. He is rushed forward, knocked unconscious, and while he's out cold, he travels to the year 802,701. He comes to briefly, shuts down his time machine, and then loses consciousness again. When he awakens, he finds himself in a shelter that is one of many that hangs off the side of a cliff. He was rescued and nursed back to health by a woman named Mara, who is one of a few people left who can speak English, which is now known as the Stone Language because it is so old and antiquated no one uses it. Alexander learns that the Earth has now healed, and that the human survivors, called the Eloy, have reverted back to a primitive lifestyle. At night, Alexander observes the broken moon, and realizes that his friend David Philby had been right. that as humans advanced their scientific knowledge, they eventually went too far. As they sleep, Alexander and Mara's younger brother Kalen dream of a frightening, jagged-toothed face and a creature calling their name. Alexander informs Mara of the dream, but she reassures him and tells him that all of the Eloy have that dream and that it's nothing to worry about. The next day, during a leisurely boat ride, Alexander notices that among the Eloy there are no elderly people, and when he questions Mara about it, she just brushes it off and tells him that some things are best left unsaid. Mara helps Alexander find his time machine, and when they do, she desperately begs him to take her brother Kalen with him. When he asks her why, she is vague with her answers, telling him that there are certain things he doesn't know. Before he can inquire further, a warning horn is sounded. "They are too early," Mara cries, and then runs off to go find her brother. All of the Eloy are in a panic because they are being attacked by ape-like monsters called Morlocks that hunt down the Eloy for food. So that explains why there are no elderly people among the Eloy. They all get eaten before they enter their 40s. Mara gets darted by a Morlock with some black, slimy, oozy tranquilizer and is dragged underground along with some other Eloy. When all the Morlocks leave and the dust settles, Alexander is outraged by the Eloy's passiveness and demands to know why they won't fight back against the Morlocks or attempt to go rescue their people. The Eloy just shrug and say it is a natural part of their life. They say that the first people to fight are usually the first taken by the Morlocks. Alexander manages to convince Kalen that they can rescue his sister, so Kalen leads Alexander to a place the Eloy think ghosts are found. Kalen leads Alexander to what is left of the New York City Public Library, and what he finds there is not a ghost, but the holographic librarian, Vox 114, who is still functional after more than 800,000 years. Vox 114 remembers Alexander from thousands of years ago and tells him how to find the Morlock's lair. When he sneaks into the lair, he is captured and thrown into an area where Mara sits in a cage. Alexander meets the uber-morlock, who tells him that apart from eating humans, they also sometimes keep the fertile females alive, whom they need to bear them children and to increase their numbers. That's why Mara is alive. She is being kept for this purpose. The uber-morlock also explains that Morlocks are descendants of humans who went underground after the moon broke apart, while the Eloy are descended from those who stayed on the surface. The uber-morlocks are a caste of telepaths who rule the other dumber and bestial Morlocks and control their thoughts. The uber-morlocks are also responsible for that scary dream that is shared among all of the Eloy. Because of the uber-morlock's telepath abilities, it knows all about Alexander and his time travel and gives him the answer as to why he cannot change the past and save Emma's life. The uber-morlock explains that Alexander cannot alter Emma's fate because her death is what drove him to build the time machine in the first place, so saving her would be virtually impossible due to temporal paradox. After giving Alexander his much sought-after answer, the uber-morlock brings him his time machine and tells him to go back to his time, not wanting him to interfere with their business anymore. Alexander gets into the time machine, but pulls the uber-morlock in with him, carrying them into the future as they fight. The uber-morlock dies by rapidly aging when Alexander pushes him outside of the machine's temporal bubble. Alexander arrives around 600 million years into the future, where the world looks barren with a rust-colored sky, and the only thing left standing is the lair of the Morlocks. In the future, they do something to the Earth that leaves it destroyed again. Alexander then goes back in time to rescue Mara. After freeing her, he starts the time machine and jams its gears with his watch, creating a violent distortion in time. Pursued by the Morlocks, Alexander and Mara escape to the surface as the time distortion explodes. This kills all the Morlocks in the caves and thus prevents the future Alexander saw of a barren planet. Unfortunately, this also means that the time machine is lost. So, now permanently stuck in the future, Alexander begins a new life with Mara and the Eloy, while Vox 114 becomes a teacher to the Eloy children. Back in 1903, Philby and Alexander's housekeeper, Mrs. Watchett, are in his laboratory discussing his absence. Philby tells Mrs. Watchett he is glad that Alexander has gone to a place where he can find peace, then tells her he would like to hire her as a housekeeper, which she accepts until Alexander returns. Mrs. Watchett bids Alexander farewell, and Philby looks towards his laboratory affectionately before finally leaving, and that is how the movie The Time Machine ends. This movie earned itself a rating of 5 out of 10, as it is not exactly a masterpiece and could have done better in terms of pacing and fleshing out the Eloy and the uber-morlocks as a whole.